right, so we're going to show you how to adjust your active panel on a patio door. The active panel is the critical component of a patio door. It's the customer experience. When a customer opens that door, they're going to be using the active panel. If there's anything wrong with the door, the customer is going to find out by the active panel. So it's important that we get it right, we get it adjusted properly. It's going to really enhance the customer experience. And so that's why we're going to cover that today. Tools are pretty simple. Phillips screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, a suction cup, and then anything long and skinny like this. This is the drill bit that we used for the fixed panel. You could use a long screw, a pencil, something like this to help us adjust the elevation on the lock. So that's what we're going to get started with. So the active panel is already in on this door, but it goes in just like the fixed panel. The fixed panel comes in and up into the header from the outside. Active panel goes in and up into the header from the inside. It's a lot easier to tell the orientation of an active panel because you got your handle, and you've got your rollers also. There's also the weeps on the bottom that we talked about with the fixed panel, and then also the glazing stops are on the exterior. So just make sure that your active panel's oriented properly. All right, so when we're adjusting a active panel, we have three options to adjust the panel. It's the rollers, that's the primary adjustment, and then from there we've also got the keeper we're gonna adjust and the lock that we're gonna adjust. So once your panel is in, the first thing to do is to make sure it's rolling properly, okay? Your care package will have the handle set in there for you to assemble and install. Right now we're gonna do it unassembled without the handle, so you'll need to use a suction cup or something to use the glass panel at that point. We recommend waiting to put the handle on just to keep it in pristine condition, but if you need to put it on, just put the handle on and you can be doing these same steps with the handle on. So the panel's in. First thing we're gonna do is just find out if it rolls and how well it rolls. So that's pretty good. That would certainly be acceptable. I can tell that it's angled this way because when I get to the end, I can tell that there's a little tension at the bottom. So it's rolling pretty good up until then. That tells me that the panel's kind of tilted this way. And so to change that, we're gonna raise up this side. When adjusting the rollers, do not use a power tool. Never use a power tool on the rollers. You will damage the roller if you use a power tool, so never do that. Additionally, don't adjust the rollers under load. So usually it's best to have someone else help you to kind of relieve the weight of the panel. If you have a suction cup, you can just lift it up. When you're adjusting the rollers, turning right or clockwise brings the panel up. If you go left or counterclockwise, the panel will sink down. There's two rollers, so this one seems good. We're just gonna adjust this one here. So Phillips screwdriver in there, I'm gonna lift up, just kind of crank it a bit. See how that looks. Yeah, so I'm not getting that tension there at the end. Seems to be in good condition here, slides in nicely. So it's sliding nicely. You can continue to adjust the rollers if you need to. The next thing to do is when it's closed, make sure that the interlock section of the door is flush, right? The way to check that is to find the relationship between the fixed panel and the active panel and ensure that it's the same offset the entire length of the panel, right? In this case, after that adjustment we just did, it's really nice and flush. These two panels are essentially oriented orthogonally, or they're square to each other, in other words. If, say, I hadn't adjusted that roller, we would notice that there's an offset. There's a slant over the length of the panel that reveals itself, and this is where a lot of the weather sealing comes from in the patio door. So to get a high-performing patio door, you're gonna need to make sure that these are lined up nice and flush, okay? So in this case they are. If they weren't, you would adjust the rollers to make sure that they are. Next, we're going to test the lock. If your handle's installed, you just use the lock on the handle. Here, you can just use a flathead screwdriver right in there. Now there's a little depression key on here, so unless this key is depressed, you can't move the locks. So the idea is to get it to depress against the keeper, and then you can test your lock. So we're just gonna shut this panel all the way into the jamb, and then test. So that locks nicely. All right, so fortunately on that one, the panel was in a position where it locked in its factory setting. I've moved the keeper to simulate if that wasn't the case. So if the panel still needs further adjustment, after you've done your rollers and checked the interlock location, you're gonna shut it and find that you can't move the lock. If you had a handle on there, you would just be using the handle lock to test. And so what we do then is to find out, okay, what is the elevation change between the keeper and the lock? And to do that, that's where we use a long screw or a drill bit. And so we're just going to put it right in the bottom there, bring it in, and set it on the bottom there. And you can see there that the keeper is below where it should be to match the lock. So what we're going to do is unscrew the keeper just a bit. And these screws are inside of they're sunk into a strong block that's inside the fiberglass. And that's really where the strength of the door security comes from. So we'll just push it up. We'll call it about halfway, go up into the middle of the adjustment range. And give that a shot. So here we could test again. We could just close the door and see that it's working, but that looks pretty level. So it's worth giving that a shot here with our screwdriver. So now the door's shut, and sure enough, now it's locking properly. The last adjustment that we have, if that's not working, or if you're still having trouble and you know that your interlock is straight and the keeper's level and it's still not getting locked in there, the last adjustment option we have is to adjust the latches on the lock. So right here on the face of the lock is the actual latch or the catch. And on the face of it, the face of those catches is a flathead screwdriver notch, and you can adjust the reach of those latches by turning them in or out. So turning them out left is to bring it out towards you, towards the screwdriver, or right would be to sink them in deeper. So if you need a little extra reach, you can always loosen or adjust those to get farther into the keeper and close the gap and get that door locked nicely. All right, so before we can go to the final stage of adjusting the patio door, we have to put our handle together and put it onto the panel. So your handle will come in the care package. It's going to be in a baggie like this. There's the interior section and the exterior section, the instructions, and the screws. Please read the instructions. They're much more detailed than what I'm going to do, but we're going to just demonstrate how to put these together. So on this one, it's easy to tell that this side is the exterior because there's no lock. There's no locking mechanism. So the lock will always be on the interior. And on this side, we can see the lock, right? So the interior and the exterior. Open our instructions and read them carefully. And now we'll go to the screws. So we have two different styles of patio door handles, and so the assembly is slightly different. This is called our Signature Series. It's a little more geometric, kind of architectural and modern looking. So before we start the assembly, we want to make sure that we've got our handles oriented properly. So on this handle here, this is the exterior like we talked about. So it's going to sit right on that face right there. And it's going to be placed on the panel like this. And so we want to make sure that our handle is oriented properly like this and not like this. Cool? So once we've got it oriented properly, again, this is all in the instructions. Just read the instructions, and it's going to answer most of the questions. Got these big fat pan heads. Those are the ones that are going to be joining the two pieces of metal here. On this, you can use an impact. All right, so the exterior is assembled. Now we're going to do kind of the same consideration on this one. It'll be going on this side of the door. So we want to make sure that the handle is going to be placed onto the panel properly. That's going to be how it's going to sit on the interior of this door right here. So same thing, once we feel good about the orientation, put these pan heads on. All right, so real quick before we go to put the handle on the door, there's gonna be some confusion around the screws. These packages originally ship with the keeper and the lock in them. So these screws are not gonna be used. These 4 go to the keeper that's already installed on your patio door. These 2 go to the lock that's already been installed in your panel. So there will be some extra screws. Don't worry, it's not a big deal. 4 of them belong to the keeper, 2 of them go to the lock. You can discard those. Okay, so we've got our handles assembled. Now we're gonna put them onto the door. This is our signature series handle. The standard series is a little less complicated than this one. So we're gonna do the complicated one just to show you. There's a zinc plate that's gonna be in the interior of the door, and you can see that there's little jogs in the metal there that fit into these holes. And then these 3, I'm dropping them, these 3 long screws go into those holes, and I usually just start with 1. So once the screw is through, you can see it coming out on the other side, and you'll take your exterior, match it up, kind of hold it in place, and then drive it home. All right, before we move on, it's important to note that if you over tighten these screws, you can crimp the door here and it won't work properly. So just make sure you're not over tightening those. You can test that by just shutting it, making sure that it goes all the way in without colliding with the other fiberglass here. So now we're going to put on the interior handle. This is the lock pin, and that's going to go into the locking mechanism here. Just look inside this main hole and make sure it's oriented properly with the slot that's in there. It can be a little tricky to fish it in there, but with time and patience, it usually works out. So that was pretty easy. You just have to jiggle it a bit, snaps on. For this style of lock, we secure the interior face with these colored screws on the inside here. And I put a bit extension on the drill because it's just a little easier to put them on with a long drill bit. So we'll start here on the top. Drive that into the side. They're a little tricky to fish into that hole. Sometimes they'll give you a little trouble. All right, so that's on. Of course, we can test it. Our panel's already adjusted, so it should be nice and smooth to lock. Now we can move on to the final step. So the final stage of the active panel installation and adjustment is to install the head bumper and the anti-lift block. These come in the care package. The head bumper is a piece of plastic with 2 screws in it. That'll be going into the header to stop the active panel. And then the anti-lift block is a sealant and a security block that goes into the header in the center of the door. I wanted to introduce the impact here because it's important to understand that when we're adjusting the active panel block, do not use a tool. Use manual tools, screwdrivers. Do not use a power tool. You can really do some damage, especially to the rollers, if you use an impact. For this phase, you can use an impact. So we're going to put the head bumper in. That's what stops the active panel from going too far and having the handle collide with the fixed panel. Your care package, the bag will have the actual head bumper and then 2 screws. I think it's best to actually just put the screws in a little bit here. The head bumper is designed to be a little bit snug up there, so you should be able to put it in and it'll stay where it's at. So it goes up into this pocket right here, and you can even slide it out a little bit and just let the door push it to where you want it. So now that it's up there, we're going to actually bring the door to where we want it to stop, and that's judged by the exterior handle, where you're going to put your door. Where do you want it to stop, right? So that's probably about good. You want to make sure they can, whoever the customer is, can grab the handle to shut it. So that's the position we want it in. And I moved that block out so that once it's in position, we've actually slid the block to where we want it. So now it's staying up there. We know that it's in position because this was pushing it as I opened it. And we're just going to drive those screws up into the header. And that should be good. Okay, the very last step of the active panel installation is putting in the anti-lift block. This is extremely important, and there are tons of cases that we see when people don't put these in. It's easy to miss. This is in your care package. It'll be labeled. It's got the QR code. Scan the code. It'll come to this video. If you do not put the anti-lift block in, your door will leak air. And in cold climates, you're going to get condensation. We get phone calls about it a lot. It's the first thing we ask whenever somebody says, my door's leaking, or I've got frost on my door, or whatever it is. This is the culprit 99% of the time. Please, please put this in. So we're going to show you how to do that. You have to put it in from the exterior first. It goes right in the center channel here in the header. You just put it all the way in, and then you push it in. You can use a screwdriver or something, and you want it to go all the way until the fuzz is just visible. And it's kind of hard to see, but if you get close enough, you can see just where it's at. There's a screw hole in there. The block comes with 2 3/4-inch screws. So once you've got it into position, and it's a little delicate, so we always want to be careful here, getting it right into that hole, and just pound it in. And again, try not to over tighten. So now that there's 1 screw in, the second screw has to go in from the interior. So once you've got that exterior screw in, close the door, and the interior screw will become available. And same thing over here. All right, we did it. Put the active panel in. Thank you for watching. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to watch the video to make sure that the door gets done right. We love our doors, we love our customers, so we really do want to say thank you for watching the video and taking the time to do this and do it properly. Last things to do are just put hole caps in, any holes, the roller adjustments, clean the door up, make it look really nice, get it ready for the homeowner. Yeah, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help, and we will see you next time.